I'm Art Holliday, 5 on your side. Let's take a walk. St. Louis is a great place to live, but you don't have to go very far to see that St. Louis can also be a rough place to live. It's a region of interesting neighborhoods and diverse cultures. But St. Louis remains one of the most segregated cities in the nation, where racial inequality is a challenging work in progress. News events expose the region's racial and societal challenges. As one local woman put it, everybody knows there's a problem. What are we going to do to solve it? We know there are no easy fixes, but we wanted to challenge ourselves and challenge you to start a conversation. So we've committed to a multi-story project, building bridges. Instead of just focusing on problems, we want to look at people who are trying to be part of the solution. In all parts of the St. Louis region, there are people who see the possibilities of working together. The artwork for these stories about building bridges is inspired by the Stan Musial Veterans Memorial Bridge. The greatest Cardinal of them all welcomed Jackie Robinson and the black players who followed at a time when many major leaguers were openly hostile to the idea of integrated baseball. Like Confluence Point State Park tells the story of two mighty rivers merging, building bridges will tell the story of St. Louisans who are trying to bring the region together. We begin with two moms who spent a lot of time talking about race and diversity.
Learning about racism, especially if we're white, is not a warm, fuzzy experience. It can be really hard, but it doesn't have to be.
Two mothers with young children, Laura Horowitz of Clayton and Adelaide Lancaster of Webster Groves, became friends. Friends who wondered out loud about a white person's role in the fight for racial equality and how they weren't sure how to talk to their kids about race.
I want my kids to explore and be ready for a world that's full of diversity, to be productive citizens in a country with a very rich and complex history around race, and how was I going to equip them to do that?
Conversations about race, diversity, equality are a challenge, or simply don't happen.
I live in a predominantly white neighborhood, and I didn't feel like my neighbors or a lot of my friends were talking about race, and especially not with their kids. There was a lot of hesitation.
No hesitation for Lancaster and Horowitz, who created the nonprofit We Stories. Two dynamic moms who've been known to hit warp speed. Is that what it's like every time you have a meeting?
Yes.
We're pretty energetic. We're very passionate about what we do.
We are welcoming you today to our larger We Stories community that is now nearly 300 additional families.
We Stories takes the universal experience of parents reading children's books to their kids and turns it into teachable moments about diversity.
It started as a program that was really focused on helping parents shift their conversations and change the way that they were talking about race as a family and the way that their kids were experiencing the concept of race.
The culturally diverse children's books selected for We Stories are books that white families might not normally choose for their children.
If you talk to our participants, probably one of the first things they say is how high quality the books are and how they simply would not have encountered them.
Books sometimes provided by I See Me bookstore owner Jeffrey Blair.
And our focus really was, frankly, on our children, on African-American children. But as we started to grow, we realized, you know what, all children need to have a positive perspective of African-Americans. And so, our three missions are early childhood literacy, positive black images for all children, as well as African-American history for all children as well.
We look for books that just have a lot of diversity included.
At this We Stories event at Adams Elementary School, Chris Phelps was book shopping with her 3-year-old Mary Lou. To the curious, how does Phelps explain the concept of We Stories?
And I tell them that it's just this awesome group that gets together and we look at books for children full of diversity, and we encourage dialogue. I thought we were always comfortable with race and talking about it and differences, and just joining the program, it made me realize how unprepared I was.
Our kids are young. We want them to understand, to value everyone, and to bring people in, and that literature, children's literature in particular, is such an easy way to talk about it with our kids.
In a little over a year, We Stories has also evolved into a parent community where adults can join group discussions about a variety of topics at We Story events or online.
The ladies who organized this put together a Facebook group, and we as parents can get on there, and if we've had a challenging topic or something's come up and we didn't know how to talk about it, we can run these ideas off of each other.
They're also thinking a lot about St. Louis as a region and what are our challenges and how can they show up differently to give our region a new story.
A story of inclusion, understanding, and finding solutions to racial issues that affect the whole region.
Our organization is built around the philosophy that probably most St. Louisans want to be part of the solution, and that many of us were touched by the events of Ferguson. And so we need solutions that are about creating community where there hasn't been one. But that's an incredible opportunity.
St. Louis and Joyce Houston, a former Las Vegas trumpeter, loves music.
We see that we're all coming from West Africa.
As her family's historian, genealogy is another decades-long passion.
I screamed, yeah! I found Ellen.
Ellen is Houston's great-great-great-grandmother. We'll get back to her in a moment.
Okay, this is our O'Kelly family tree.
Since the 1940s, O'Kelly family descendants have been holding family reunions. Chicago, Las Vegas, Anaheim, Atlanta.
Growing up, it was an amazing experience having family reunions.
It was those family reunions that sparked Houston's interest in uncovering the rest of her family history.
And I looked at my grandmother, and they all were fair-skinned with this silky hair, and I was curious to know, where was this white connection?
Ellen Fisher, Houston's great-great-great-grandmother, was a slave.
This is the oldest picture that we are aware of in our family archives.
A slave who bore children from two white slave owners, John Beatty O'Kelly and his brother James Edward O'Kelly.
We always knew that we had a plantation owner that had, children with our slave ancestor.
Determined detective work led to Houston discovering some of the white descendants of John and James O'Kelly. 17 years ago, she contacted R.G. Shumway in Utah.
None of us knew. Until Joyce Ann contacted us, we didn't know. This was not a conversation that my family had.
Then I approached her around 2000 and said, I think we're related. We share the same genealogy, and she accepted us immediately.
Recently, R.G.'s son Bradley Rainier and grandson Benjamin came to St. Louis to say hello to their black cousins.
I love my cousins and have been blessed by the opportunity to get to meet them. The circumstances that have made it that way have been negative, but the fact that we can be in touch with that side of the family and make friends gives it a sense of this generational healing.
These are very beautiful, sweet, loving people, and we didn't have any barriers set up, and they didn't have any. We just okay, let's come on, let's go do this, let's know one another.
It would be easy for them to maybe look at me and feel maybe some resentment or some other feelings, but I didn't get any of that. Everything I felt was love and concern. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, but it was powerful.
A powerful moment linking the present to a painful past.
We don't have to be mad at, each other's race because of what happened in the past. Let's be an example. Let's show this from where we are right now, that we can come together. The two races can come together and embrace each other. That's what I'm hoping that this story will be able to show.
I think when we start looking at what we have in common than what we have that's different, we're going to find a great big bridge.
We offer these concerts free because we want to bring people together to be able to enjoy something as one. Music is something that people have in common, regardless of age, race.
the joyful noise will definitely make the difference.
The joyful noise of the Community Gospel Choir of St. Louis, more than 70 voices strong. A big sound with an even bigger goal, trying to change the hearts and minds of St. Louis, one gospel hand clap at a time.
And the Community Gospel Choir is the organization that, in all its sincerity, is trying to bridge a gap between the races.
Unfortunately, the most segregated part of our week is Sunday morning. We have black churches and we have white churches, and that's just wrong. It's not the way this community should be.
That's why in 2007, Cecilia Stearman, the woman in black, formed the Community Gospel Choir as its first director.
We wanted something different. We knew we needed to make a statement.
The current choir director is Suzanne Palmer.
We all want to know more about each other, and the conversations are happening because of the music.
Performing half a dozen concerts a year, the Community Gospel Choir is always looking for new members. No audition required.
I think that's one of the really great things about the choir is it's diverse, and we're trying to continue to make it more diverse, so you start to meet people that are a little different than you, and that just expands your worldview.
And the mission was to spread the gospel and bring the races together, and that's right up my alley. That's my life.
When we have a concert and we bring people together who don't normally sit in those pews together, and they get to sit next to each other, and one of the things I always ask people to do when they come to those concerts is to talk to each other.
Cynics will argue that any harmonic connection between people is overrated and downplay the healing power of music to solve societal problems. Maybe the cynics haven't taken time to listen, because even when words fail, the music speaks.
Even if people's minds are only opening up a little bit, they're opening.
Everyone has a story to tell. Lindy Drew is willing to listen. It starts with an introduction.
My name's Lynn. I'm doing a project called Humans of St. Louis.
It ends with a photograph.
That's great, guys. That's great. Can you put your arm around him? Cool. I like it.
In between, a lot of questions.
So this is the project I'm doing, guys. It's Humans of St. Louis. Okay. And basically I just walk up to strangers and ask them some questions about life and whatnot. Destiny, what's something you're teaching Christian right now? What's the dumbest thing that adults do? Why do you stay here? You've been here 20 years.
I'm telling you, I can't afford to leave. Why would I leave now?
Before you know it, total strangers who might not otherwise meet share their stories and pose for a photograph. More than 1,300 of these stories can be found on the Facebook page Humans of St. Louis.
That's great. And turn towards me a little bit more. There you go.
Lindy Drew and her former Washington University classmate Caroline Fish decided St. Louis should have what New York had, a social media photo stories project about everyday people. After visiting all parts of the St. Louis region, Drew chooses the best photos and the best stories and posts them on Facebook. That's where another conversation starts, the online reaction to stories of all kinds.
Immigration issues and healthcare or racial equity. How are you going to receive someone else's comments if they're on the opposite side of the spectrum of where you're from?
Not everyone's story makes it online, but everyone has a story to tell. It could be a story from a happy little girl.
And we asked her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, a doctor. So we asked her a follow-up question. What kind of a doctor? And she thought about it and she goes, a Dr. Seuss.
It might be a painful story.
And she said, you know, about 10 years ago, I had a son and he died of SIDS. And I got a note from the coroner, and the coroner said, I'm very sorry for your loss, but just know that in no way is this your fault.
Or a tearful story about guns and leg amputation.
What's something you've learned about yourself since this happened?
You gotta be strong, gotta keep going forward.
Everyone has a story to tell, a lesson to teach, a dream to share, something or someone that made them the way they are.
Because if you're from this region, you're connected. Even if you don't think that you are, it affects you. It affects all of us, right? All right, guys, take care.
All right, you too.
That was a great story, too.
Art Holliday, 5 on your side. Hip-hop doesn't always glorify gun violence.
They think it's okay. You cool, put it down. We ain't with that gunplay. Put the gun down and watch them pick it up.
Urban storytelling with an anti-gun message.
Peace has no sound. Hands up, put the guns down.
We do a lot on gun violence because that is the main issue that the youth here want to work on.
Susan Colangelo is the president and CEO of the nonprofit St. Louis Story Stitchers Artist Collective, based in University City. What's the message from your organization as far as gun violence is concerned, especially in St. Louis?
Drop the gun and pick up a book. We're hashtag drop the gun, hashtag keep the peace.
Story Stitchers provides a creative outlet for young artists 16 to 24 years old.
We help them get their voices out.
Musicians, videographers, photographers, poets, hip-hop artists, and dancers.
It's a habit. I can't stop dancing, so I love it.
High schooler Antonio Clark joined Story Stitchers to be a role model.
You can be different. Like, I like standing out, you know what I'm saying? So you ain't gonna see me with no guns or nothing like that. I just want the rest of my youth and the rest of my generation to understand that there's no point in what they're doing.
I had a cousin who was recently shot by a gang this year, actually.
I know a lot of people that lost their lives to gun violence, family members, or just friends, or just people that I knew from school.
The message to drop the gun is personal for the Story Stitchers, and that's why many of the performances take place in the neighborhoods where they live.
So Walnut Park, Jeff Vanderloo, we've gone into the Juvenile Detention Center.
Rap session on gun violence.
It's not just performances. Story Stitchers organizes community forums like this Gun Violence Summit.
Improve relationship between police and minority youth. The best practices for police and youth interaction and ending the no snitching phenomenon.
Young people using their skills to be part of the solution, stitching together our city.
Not another one falling victim to the gun cloud. Not another one.
I can use my talent as a weapon for people to see that we can stop the gun violence, and so that they may not listen to an older adult, but they may listen to me because I'm on the same level and page as them.
We are picking the city up, and I think what we're doing is community building.
Christian Johnson is an Army veteran and former St. Louis police officer for 3 years, now a social activist and protester. Eliza Coriel is owner of the Crow's Nest Bar and author of a controversial letter supporting protesters signed by more than 150 local small businesses. Tom Schweitzer is a retired business executive who leads discussions on race and white privilege. 79-year-old Lou Ann Tinnis was the catalyst for the conversation after she wrote the following message. I'm an old white lady. I don't know what it's like to be a black man. I don't know what it's like to be a cop. I would like to know about these protests. I can't understand what they want. Why did you contact me with that response?
My biggest problem is, what do they want? Why don't they tell me what they want?
We're protesting the loss of lives at the hand of police that is disproportionately targeted at black men.
Even with protesters, we have faith in the system. That the system will do what it's supposed to do, but when that doesn't happen, that's a problem, and that's why there's protests, because we clearly see that this was unjust.
White people have made the rules, and most white people don't understand their privilege and how the society we've created negatively affects people of color.
Christian, one of the questions posed by Lou Ann was not understanding what it's like to be a police officer.
You can be leaving just a simple fender bender and then going straight to a homicide scene and being able to your adrenaline is peaking, so you're having this constant spike. I've had times where like I would get off shift and have a headache just because of the highs and lows.
Taking the stand that you did along with other business owners, do you think it's had an impact?
I think that it helped get a message out, and it's a message that I believe in. So in that way, I think it had an impact.
What are the police supposed to do if there is a situation? I know the policeman is not to be judge, jury, and executioner. I absolutely believe in that. But then what can they do?
If we hire people to be police officers, we train them, we expect them to perform a certain way. The police, that's why they have a gun. They do have the ability to shoot. They do have the ability to tase. That's why they have tasers. They have the ability to arrest. They have the ability to do all those things. It's just knowing exactly what's appropriate at that appropriate time.
How can people demand the court make a decision when they haven't been in the courtroom and don't know the facts? That's what started this protest.
It astonished me that a sitting judge would write, but that a urban heroin dealer without a gun would be an anomaly. To me, urban is code for black, and that statement rings of such bias to me.
As a former police officer, I've arrested heroin dealers without guns. So, you know, I've seen it. So it can be, it is possible.
Final thoughts, anyone?
We can create a society that is truly equal to all people. But it takes a lot of work, and I welcome Luann to the journey and proud of her for asking the questions and participating.
Food for thought. What are the challenges when police officers interact with the deaf community?
We all know somebody who is deaf, who's had a horrible encounter with police officers.
The nonprofit Deaf Incorporated wants to cut down on the number of difficult encounters when people who are deaf or hard of hearing come in contact with the police.
You know, why are you not listening to me? Why are you not looking at me? What have you? Those are recipes for disaster.
Corporal Jason Clardy from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department recently met with members of the deaf community. This woman shared her frustration after she and her son were stopped by police.
When he had left, I had asked my son what he said, and the son didn't even know what he had said.
And the police officer thinks I'm ignoring them. How can I identify myself as a deaf person?
We run into either someone that's deaf or hard of hearing. That can be, it's almost a shock to us. We don't know how to respond initially because it's something that we don't deal with every day. When we are out there, we're thinking worst case scenario.
Less than a year ago, that worst case scenario took place outside Charlotte, North Carolina. Daniel Harris, a man who was deaf, was shot dead by State Trooper Jermaine Saunders after trying to avoid a traffic stop. Because there was a high-speed chase,
100 MPH, 100 MPH.
It's unclear how much Harris's deafness contributed to the fatal encounter.
It's a two-way street, and we want a collaboration between the community and the police officers.
Devin Whitmore says there is growing recognition that training, along with question and answer sessions involving the hard of hearing and the police, is beneficial.
The officers have told us that they've got really good results. They feel more confident, they feel more prepared. So if they were to have an encounter with a deaf person, they would better know what to do.
I think you're looking at the future of law enforcement. It's bridging all gaps with all communities. You're just setting yourself up for success.
My name is Pearl Maddox, and I am the chairman of the Citizen Civil Rights Committee. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. It is an injustice that in 1944 we cannot sit and eat where we shop. She seemed so sweet and innocent, but I could hear this voice that was a lot stronger. We made phone calls, and yet we were ignored. So we decided to sit in. We wanted to air our grievances publicly, hoping to awaken the community conscience. So on May 15, we sat in at Stick's lunch counter. And the manager couldn't wait to talk to us then, while the waitresses sputtered around trying to figure out what to do. We shall not be moved. These stores, Sticks, Bear and Fuller, Famous Bar, Scruggs, Vandervoort and Barney, all gladly take the money of the Negro for the goods that they sell, but will not let us sit and eat. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Old Sticks fears that its white customers wouldn't want to sit next to a Negro. Oh, it's going to take many years of education for the public to accept integration. I said, wouldn't a wonderful place to start that education be right here at Sticks' lunch counter? I said to a family one day, don't leave here feeling like we were the victims. We are victors because of so many men and women who were willing to gamble, take a chance. We are going to push and push and push until we force them to practice the very democracy that they preach.